What's going on, everybody? John Eric Poli here with my MMA news, and today's guest just defeated Malik Lewis on Dana White's Contender series to earn a UFC contract. Pleased today to be joined by Trevor Peek. Trevor, nice seeing you again. This is awesome. We got to do an interview right before the fight. Now everything came to fruition. You got a contract. Now we're here to talk all about it again. Thanks for being here, man. Appreciate it, and congrats on the win.
Hey man, thanks for having me on. I'm glad to do this stuff.
Awesome, man. So I want to actually start with the big, powerful message that was brought with this fight. And actually, on our last interview, we kind of just scratched the surface on this topic, and you really got in depth with it before the fight. So to fill anybody in that may have missed the fight, essentially, whenever these fights happen on Dana White's Contender series, the UFC broadcast team will air a pre-fight package in which the fighters talk about themselves, and you use that moment to talk about how you used to have problems with addiction. So I did want to start there. Just talk about that a little bit and why you wanted to really present that message, and just talk a little bit about some of the struggles that you had to go through with all of that too, man. Because it's a real serious topic, and I give you a lot of credit for being able to overcome it, because a lot of people aren't able to.
Yeah, man. Well, I knew whenever I set out on this journey trying to make a career for myself, and I knew I would man, honestly, I knew I could be pretty good. I knew I could be, just with the experience that I'd had, like street fighting and stuff. I knew I was gonna make a pretty good run at this stuff, especially if I got around the right people. And I told God, whenever I first started figuring out who he was and getting a relationship with him, I was just like, man, like I could really do good for the world. If you'll take away some of these things that I'm dealing with, like I'll let you use me. I'll be a vessel for you if you'll just take these things away from me. And so, as soon as I got the opportunity to, man, like I started telling the world about what God had done for me, and I wanted to do that because, like, man, my goodness, man, I've been to jail so many times. I've been to rehab multiple times. I mean, I've been through so many different drug and IOP classes, just all kinds of AA meetings, and just everything a person could use to get to beat the things that I was dealing with. I used them things, and nothing really clicked for me. And after I started getting a relationship with Jesus and all that good stuff, I started like being proud of myself in a way. I started like actually knowing, I started like figuring out who I was as a person. Like, I spent so many my younger years, like as a teenager and young adult, and I stayed so messed up, man. I didn't really know who I even was. And so once I started to figure out who I was, and like he gave me a purpose and an identity, I started to love myself, and I wanted to tell people about my experiences with it, so maybe that they could experience the things that I was experiencing with him.
And what was this whole process like too? Obviously, you mentioned finding God and going through the rehab process, but what exactly was the process like? I imagine it was a very long journey, because anyone that goes through something like that when you're an addict, to get out of it, it really is a struggle. You mentioned the different type of groups and that, but just touch on that a little bit more, and just kind of what that process was like of actually getting out of that hole there.
I mean, I started getting in trouble as early as 15 years old, man. I mean, I stole my mother's car one night, and I ended up getting into some alcohol after I took it, and then flipped the car multiple times, got a DUI, and then I just kept getting in trouble, man. I think before I was 20 years old, I'd already been arrested like probably like 6, 7 times, something like that, multiple times while I was still in school. I mean, there was a few crazy incidences that I had the whole community, literally the whole community like was pretty well bashing me. I several incidences, and rightfully so. I mean, I did some crappy things, and made a bad name for myself. And so immediately, like, I mean, at 15 years old, I'm already in the system. I'm having to go and take drug tests and call every day, and that was it was aggravating, man. I mean, I mean, like I said, I put myself in that predicament, and a lot of times in kind of situations where I was forced to go and take drug test stuff, they actually like helped save me in a way too, you know. So I went through all that stuff, and then just kept getting in trouble, man. And then later on in life, you know, end up having that car wreck, and I knew after I had that car wreck that something, you know, something was going to have to change. And you know, they put me on a thing called color code down there, and I had to call, and I had to report like I did whenever I was, well, through my whole teenage years. And it was a 4 month pre-trial, and at the end of it they said I did my 4 months, and then that woman was like, you know, you're done, like you don't have to come back down here anymore. And I was like, can I stay on it? And she was like, what do you mean? I was like, can I stay on it? Can I keep coming down here and like keep calling and keep taking tests? And she was like, you want to stay on color code? I was like, yeah. When she said, why? And I was like, you don't know me, do you? And she was like, well, no. And she said, are you scared you're going to give yourself enough rope to hang yourself on? And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm scared of. I don't trust myself. And, you know, I did that for 20 more months after, you know, I did 20 months extra than what I was required to do. And then did a year of community corrections where I was confined to the state of Alabama. And just getting through all that was a, it was a task, man. It really limited my training. You know, a lot of people, I don't think the world understands how much time with coaches I've really had. Like there's been a big part of my career that I haven't really I've been by myself. And things I've done and where I've made it to in my career with as much coaching as I have had. I ain't saying the coaching I haven't had hasn't been just the best in the world, because I feel like I am surrounded by the best coaches in the world. It's just there's been a big part of the time I hadn't got to be with them. You know what I mean? But just getting to where I'm at is, I mean, it blows my mind. But that whole process of trying to get out of the system, man, once you're in the system, I mean, the system, it's really hard to get away from. And then I credit everything that I was able to get through. God, he really brought a lot, and a lot for me.
Trevor, I really appreciate you opening up with all of this too. It's not an easy topic to talk about, and I know that you want to use this platform as a professional fighter in the UFC to help people. What's your message out there to people that have maybe been in a similar situation as you, people that are going through it right now, that there is help out there for people to get themselves out of their drug and alcohol addictions?
I mean, the best piece of advice I feel like anybody in the world could ever get for any kind of circumstance or situation or just the purpose of life would be chase God. You know, I went and I was fortunate enough to go be able to go speak to a football team and cheerleaders, and just about, I guess that's probably 100 plus people at this church last night. I was blessed enough to be able to go do that, and that was the whole thing I talked to them about was just chase God. You know, if you will put half of the effort that you put forward chasing a high, if you'll put forth half of that effort, that same effort chasing God, man, your whole life will change. You know, it's crazy, but being an addict, and you know, and being around people that's addicted and stuff, like we like you try really hard to chase that high. I mean, there, you know what I mean? Like you can't even. It's crazy how hard you will try to chase a high or a buzz. Like you'll go to crazy, crazy lengths just to get that next high. And if you'll put forth half of that effort, man, then and put it in a good direction of chasing God, your whole life will change.
100%. And like I said, thanks again for opening up about all that too. It's a very powerful message, and I really love that you're using your platform too to get this message out there to the masses. I do want to now obviously talk about the reason why we're here, and that is obviously you being a professional fighter, earning this UFC contract. Let's actually kind of maybe segue a little bit into it here. As obviously, we opened up with this powerful message, this powerful topic. Where did MMA exactly start into playing into a factor with all that? I know a lot of fighters will say if they have had problems that MMA has kind of saved their life to a degree. Did you have any similar situations like that? Like when you got involved with the sport, did it help you stay on a clean and narrow path?
Yeah, I owe everything I am like to not everything I am. I owe so much credit to the sport. I mean, it gave me I knew, man, I felt that it was God's purpose for me, to fight. Feel like a lot of people was like, how could that be God's purpose fighting? Well, I get to reach a whole different platform and get to tell people about God's love and God's grace that a lot of times they don't otherwise would get to hear. I get a crowd that maybe wouldn't end up in church sometimes in a way. Like, I mean, I've been in a bar, I fought in a bar one time or a couple times, and I've got to tell people about God and everything. So it's just, yeah, I owe so much to to the sport, man. It really gave me a purpose and give me an extra area to figure out like how to be disciplined in. And it taught me discipline, and I feel like discipline, it goes, and that's kind of what I told them kids last night. That discipline, I feel like, is one of the most powerful words in the whole world. What you can apply it to literally anything there is in this world. As long as you're disciplined at whatever you're doing, like you can achieve it. So it taught me so much, man. It taught me it just there's a list a mile long of the things that it's given me and things that it's taught me, and I could never be more grateful to the sport. It really did save my life, man. I've had injuries and stuff in the past, and or had life come up where I couldn't train as much or couldn't train at all for that matter, and I'm just not I'm just not the same person when I can't train, man. Mentally, it just does something different for me. I feel like everybody in the world that's capable, obviously, should do some form of it. Whether then maybe it's not MMA or maybe not even that martial art, but just some form of physical activity. Whether it be just going to the gym or anything, man. I feel like everybody in the world should do something because that gives you a sense of pride about yourself, being happy, feeling accomplished. And if you feel accomplished about yourself, man, there's just so much more things you can unlock in this world if you have a sense of accomplishment about yourself. And MMA give me that sense of accomplishment, and they give me a fulfillment too.
And all that discipline and accomplishment led to this point now where you are a UFC fighter. And let's tell everybody about that now, just how you obviously got to this point. It was Dana White's Contender Series. You get to fight right in front of the boss, Dana White. Your fight with Malik Lewis, right? Malik, real big guy. He comes out the opening round. He hits you with probably everything but the kitchen sink. Like at one point, I know the referee was thinking about stopping the fight, but you were able to stand in there tough and able to survive that opening round before getting the finish in the second round. We're going to start with that opening round first, though, before we get into the finish. Just talk about what was going on that round and where your kind of mindset was at, because a lot was going on there and it looked like it was close to being over at one point. Just where were you at with your wits about you, and were you really badly hurt at all?
Well, man, honestly, my nerves was I thought I was past being nervous, really. But like, my nerves was terrible. I end up I ain't flew a whole lot in my life. Airplane. I've been on it a few times, but I started having like feeling like I had vertigo after weigh-ins. I was having dizzy spells off and on all day long, and that started making me get in my head. And I was telling Jeff and Sterling, I was like, man, I keep getting dizzy. And we kept trying little bitty like home remedies and stuff to get me to quit being dizzy. And I'm like, man, maybe I was just dehydrated. And then Jeff was like, man, it might be that plane ride. It's probably just vertigo. And the next day, like, so immediately I'm already getting in my head about the fight. I'm like, what if this carries on into the next day? And then fight day rolled around, and I got up, made breakfast, and probably about an hour and a half after I got up, I started having them dizzy spells again. And they wasn't nothing just crazy, man. Like, I wasn't ever so dizzy. I had to sit down. It was just like I just felt loopy headed kind of, and it really got me in my head about it. Like, I remember sitting in the room at one point, it wasn't long before we headed over to the venue, and I was like, man, this is the first time. Like, there's only been one other time I fought a boy in Kentucky back in my amateur career, and that I was feeling like that on fight day, and I was just kind of like, I wanted to fight. I just kind of wished it was the next day. You know what I mean? Like, but unfortunately, it don't work like that. And we headed to the venue, and I put on some old walkout songs that I listened to in the past for my previous fights, and I got in the mood, man. You know, I come alive. I was like, all right, I'm ready to go. And had my crowd been there when we got to the apex, I think my nerves would have been fine because, man, I feed so much off of my crowd. I mean, it's crazy. But when we got there, and they wasn't like, I was in the mood, and then when we got there, it was kind of like I had to go in the room by myself and sit there for a long time, and I just got out of the mood again, man, because and then I was having them dizzy spells a little bit here and there, and then and then in the back, man, I went from being the fastest I've ever been in my entire career at the end of my camp, man. I was lightning fast. I was hitting harder than I've ever hit. I mean, I was cutting weight the night before, and or the before weigh-ins, I was cutting weight and real depleted, and I was hitting pads to get my sweat going. And Jeff was even like, "Man, you're looking better than you've ever looked in your life." And I was like, "I'm popping, ain't I?" And I was just real stoked and real excited, man. And whenever we got there, man, my arms and my legs felt like they was 1,000 pounds apiece. I mean, I was just, if I couldn't move, and like Jeff was trying to tell me, like, man, as you're just in your head, you're hitting like you normally do. But I knew I wasn't. And even after the fight, he was like, I ain't gonna lie, man, I was a little worried back there when he was warming up. And it just all was attributed to nerves, man. Nerves, the body and the mind's a powerful thing, man. So I knew in my heart going in there that that first round was probably about to be really rough. I mean, just because the way I was training in the back and the way I was feeling, like I wasn't feeling it, man. I didn't, my switch wasn't flipped yet. And so whenever we got in there, man, like, and then he come running in there, and he looked twice as big as he did at weigh-ins. I was like, man, this big old boy. And it reminded me so much of that Peyton Hughes fight from my amateur career. The whole day, everything, the size of the guy, just it all reminded me so much of that fight. But yeah, that first round was it was pretty brutal, man. Like the headshots, yeah, he had me fuzzed up. He kind of like, it was one of them, like whenever the ref was about to step in, I was kind of like just reaching my hands out to kind of feel where he's at. I mean, he hit me so many times I didn't really know where he was at, you know. And I didn't ever feel like I was about to the point of like going out. He definitely rocked me, you know, but like, I mean, I didn't feel like I was about knocked out. I never felt like I was about knocked out. I had one of them, like, kind of like, God, where's he at moments. And then yeah, I can't tell you how many things have went through my head. And it's amazing how many, it's kind of like that term, like hyper arousal, man. Everything kind of like, I didn't feel like he slowed down, but my mind kind of slowed down. You know what I mean? I was just thinking of all these things. I'm like, man, everybody back home is watching you get your tail whooped. And then I'm like, it's going to be another year before you have to get here. And like in my head, I was just playing out all these scenarios of like, what am I going to say? And then that all kind of changed, you know, quickly. But for a second there, I was like, man, what have I got in here with? I was like, God, what have I got in here with, man? This guy's a monster. And he landed a body shot, man. He centered me up with a knee. I think it was about the third knee he threw in the fight. I got bent over, got over my hips, and he centered me up, man, with a knee. And I'm talking about, I've been in all kinds of fights, sparring sessions, everything, man, and I have never in my life felt a body shot that hurt me like that. I mean, I guess probably for 30 seconds to a minute, I'm sure the world couldn't hear it like they could or people there, but I was just like, just real loud for, I mean, forever, man. And I remember thinking, I was like, well, he knows I'm hurt. There ain't no hiding this one. He knows I'm hurt, man. He's about to really turn it up. And I just kept digging down, man. And there was a turning moment at the end of that first round. I landed a right knee into a left hook, and and man, if you've got this, then you know what I'm talking about. And the people that has this, they know what I'm talking about. Like, dude, there's almost like a primitive sense about some people that you can sense, you can tell when the tide is turning and changing, man. And when I landed that right knee into left hook, I felt him change. I instantly, man, it was like everything changed. Now my switch had flipped prior to that. I reversed him, and my switch had started to come alive. You can even see me in the video. You can see when my face changes. But I knew, I told myself in that, like, in that moment, I was like, you're going to beat him. Like, you're going to beat him, man. Just keep being tough. Keep being tough, man. I had so many conversations going through my head, but I was like, in my head, I was already like, I've won this fight. And in between the rounds, I didn't even hardly hear what my coaches said to me, man. I was so focused on studying him across the ring. And, he's kind of doing this number. And I'm just sitting there staring at him, studying him, man. And I just felt it. I felt that killer in him, or maybe not the killer. I just felt his momentum leave him. You know what I mean? And so going into that second round, I knew I could finish him, and I knew I just felt like I was going to, man.
Yeah, and indeed, you flipped that script just like that. And that second round, man, you laid the beating down on him there, and it seemed like he was gassed and didn't want to be in there, and you took advantage of it there. Talk about that second round now and how you were able to get the job done, get the finish, and get the praise of Dana White afterwards. Because afterwards, Dana White was so impressed with the performance. He talked about the heart that you had and everything else. You really made a big impression on the boss with the victory here in the second round.
Well, you can tell. Yeah, you can tell I'm a different fighter coming out in that second round, man. I'm a little different, man. My switch had finally come on, and typically, it don't take that. Normally, it's on whenever I mean, before I even walk out of the curtains, man. Normally, I'm ready to daggum just throw down. But like I said, my crowd not being there, and man, that was such a strange feeling. It felt like you could hear crickets in that place, man. I was hearing his corners more than I was mine. It was super crazy, man. But yeah, I knew I had to put it on him. I could tell by looking at him, and between that first second round, I knew I had to put it on him. So, I started trying to take it to him, man. And he one of my corners said something, and I kind of backed up, and I was like, "What?" And I'm glad I backed up, because that's when he went for that spinning back fist. And I don't know, I just seen it coming, and I timed it and took him down, and that's whenever I started putting down him a little bit. And then on towards, there at the end of the round, man, I just knew I knew he didn't want to be in there anymore. And I was even screaming at Mike Beltran, like, while I was hitting Malik, I was screaming at Mike Beltran. I was like, he don't want to be in here anymore, man. He don't want to be in here anymore. And like, Malik made like one little last effort to get up, and I just kept riding him. And then we ended up back down on the ground, or I ended up getting him in the mount again. And I was just like, and then I could tell, man, you can see it. Like, I knew he was too tired. He didn't want to be in there, and he's kind of turning his face away from me. And I was telling Mike Beltran again, I was like, see, man, I told you don't want to be in here. I'm just hitting him. But yeah, it was, man, it was a crazy experience. My coaches was like, it honestly, man, it took me a little bit to even be proud of myself. I was so disappointed. And I feel like that's what makes the greatest fighters in the world is, they don't ever they don't ever care about what they done right. It's what did I do wrong? And, I can have a week worth of great practices. And if I have a bad practice, man, it eats me alive. And so that first round, I was so upset at myself, and for being, and I kept trying to tell myself, like, man, it's just nerves. It was just your nerves. Like, you're better than that. Like, people don't know how good you are yet. Like, it's just your nerves. But even knowing it was my nerves, I still beat myself up for so long about how bad that first round looked at times. And but yeah, man, it was just. I'm just glad I got that contract, man. I feel like things are really about to change for me. So it's really cool stuff. I can't go anywhere now without being recognized. It's wild. It's really wild.
I bet, man. And I was just gonna actually ask you the very next question. Has it sunk into you that you are in the UFC?
I have moments, man. I have moments where it kind of sinks in, but I just honestly, man, I feel like a regular person in a way. Like, I feel like it hits in moments. Like, I catch myself occasionally. I'll be kind of like driving down the road or something. I'll just be like, man, I'm a UFC fighter, and I'll get to grinning, and it really is cool. The kids, man, I'm telling you, the little kids, seeing the little kids come up to me and their faces lit up and glowing, man, that kind of stuff, man, it really just I'll be a little big old baby about it, man. It really just it makes me daggum just humble to my core, man. But yeah, I have moments where it hits, and I'm like, dude, you check one goal off the list on the run to the title now. I know it'd be a little bit, man, but that's the next one on the list is trying to get that world title.
And then as you know, you try to process everything, and so there are moments where it has sunk in that you're in the UFC. You get this question here: when do you want to debut?
Man, it's looking probably like, man, I'd like to fight here soon. Honestly, as far as mentality, my mental mentality goes, it's just I had some kind, my legs was real beat up after the Kama fight, and then the other night. I couldn't hardly walk after the fights. But they even took an X-ray of my left leg, and I went back and watched the video, and like I went to throw a kick, and he was trying to do like a flying knee, I think, or something, and I smacked his knee with. I didn't hit him with my shin. I hit him with the outside of my leg and my ankle, and it's kept me down for the last week. Um, but man, honestly, I might be on before the end of the year. There's a card in Orlando, Florida, December 3rd, and then there's another card in the middle of December back in Las Vegas. So maybe one of them cards, man. I would love to fight on one of them cards as long as my body will, as long as my body gets healed up properly and I can have a good training camp because there's just been so many of these camps, man, that I've really been pressed for time and well, like the Kama fight with the lung infection and COVID, that it's just that they haven't felt right, and I really want that to feel right.
All right, man. Thanks so much for all the time here today. Really appreciate it. I know we've been going at this for pretty close to like a half hour now with this conversation. It's been a great conversation too. We talked about a lot of serious topics, a lot of interesting takes on different things, and I think it's great that you're using the platform to talk about addiction and everything else like that. Again, thanks for opening up about all that stuff there, and congrats on the contract. Just one last thing though before you head out. You got the last word here with all this. If you just want to go ahead and plug your social media so people know where to follow you at. I don't know if you want to give shout out to any of your coaches or teammates. Obviously, see you're wearing the Ruby Sport shirt there with your picture on it there. Ruby, of course, your management team, great guys there. Just want to give any shout outs like that. Floor is yours.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Trevor Peek underscore MMA or Instagram at Trevor Peek MMA. Facebook is just Trevor Peek or Trevor. I got an athlete page too. It's Trevor Peek MMA. Yeah, I want to thank I want to thank all of my coaches. Everybody at Gogi. I'm still fortunate enough to be able to. I'm still staying at the gym for right now, just so I can keep training and getting ready for this UFC debut. So Matt Harris, Sterling Pace, Larry Scott, and just thank all of them guys for just everything they've done for me. And I always want to thank Jeff Powell and for just man, that guy's been with me for he's been with me for so long. And Rocky Quinn, he took time out of his life. He took a bunch of time out of his life, man, took me to some places to get some rough sparring in before this last fight, man. I went and sparred some absolute killers, and he took time of his life to go help me do that. And I always want to thank my management team, Ruby Sports Entertainment, my manager Steve Swedish, man. He's just one of the he's such a cool guy. I mean, he really is. I'm so blessed to have him, and I'm so thankful that I went that direction in life. I didn't even much entertain really any other management companies after I talked to him, man. It was one of them. I felt it in my heart, as soon as the moment I talked to him, I was like, I'm gonna end up signing with that guy. He's genuine, and I know he'll care about me, and he'll be somebody that I can hug and tell him I love him after these fights. And I was looking for that more so than just the big. There's some other things. I was looking for the relationship, and and just thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for everything He's done for me, for giving me this platform to be able to try to be somebody for Him, and just thank you, man, for having me.